All right, welcome back into another One Piece beginner guide. Today, we're going to talk through Kid. He is the green starter deck leader, and honestly, he's probably in my top 3 favorites, and as well as probably one of the top 3 best decks. So I think this is a good way to start learning about it, because you'll probably see it in these upcoming events here in February. And of course, this isn't the first beginner guide. If you look at the top left, right, one of those, you can see my playlist, and I will be doing other ones. I think next up is Kaido. Let me know if you want to see any other guide. Our boy Alexis also did the first place Odin deck. You can always check that out. But just let me know in the comments. I think Kid is actually a really good deck to start out. It's actually one of my, I think it's the first deck that I ever learned to play on outside of the demo deck. And I think he is, how do I say it? I think he's like one of the more forgiving decks. Like Luffy is up there. Kid is definitely there. I think like he benefits as far as the pros for the deck. He benefits from being a win condition in himself from the leader, because at any time you can just slap a bunch of Dawn and then just re-swing either to one of their characters or straight to their leader's face and just do damage. There are a lot of really good green cards from Law to any of the other things that that rest, and as well as KO and rest. But there is a little bit of finessing on the con side, because you are only able to KO things on play while they're in rest mode. Plus, you are basically the yellow, if you're coming from DBS, of the color, or in that color, where you have to rest things and it doesn't really do anything else. Because how the way the game is right now in set 1, it is pretty basic. And I think because Kid is it has that built-in win condition, and because it has all of these tools to rest things and get all the problems away whether it's blockers or things that they hard casted for 4 and now you get to rest it and then just swing at it with a bunch of Dawn, you know, those type of things. Because of all of that, I think it's in a really good place in this format. But I've said it before, where any deck can actually win up until probably set 2 or 3, who knows. Now, if you're starting out and you're a complete beginner and you're watching this, you will need one of the, well, probably 2 of the starter decks, which comes with a bunch of the cards that you need and a bunch of other commons in the set, and that's pretty much all you need. It's the 2 starter decks and a number of commons, uncommons, a couple rares in the set, and it's actually pretty cheap. I think the best method as far as this deck goes is just to go through all of the cards and just talk about a little bit of what the Dawn curve and cost curve will look like. And what that means is that we're going to be playing from 1 Dawn to 10 Dawn, basically, and what that should entail and what you're probably going to run into as well. So we got the lore cost. All the 1 costs are pretty straightforward, right? So in this deck, at least in this list, and some people play 4/4, we do have Momo, where it looks at the top 5 and you can grab a Wano Country or Wano Country. I'm not a One Piece fan. Or Bonnie, where you can look at the top 5 and see, or grab a Supernovas, which can be your event cards, can be their kids, any of the 2 cost counters, the Oppo, dude, I'm gonna butcher these names. I'm not even gonna try. And among other things, which we'll go through as well. So Bonnie is probably gonna be the best thing that you can play turn 1, and then turn 2 you can rest it and then use a blocker, a 1 cost blocker afterwards to protect it. And just the longer that you have Bonnie on the board, the more value that you'll ever have compared to any game that you don't have her on. Same thing for Momo, but Momo has less. It has less targets in this deck, and pretty much in general that you want to play in Kid. But there are good amount of targets, and I think 2 to 3 is the best option for him personally. I could be wrong. The Japanese lists, the Asian lists, have had both, where it's just Bonnie or both Momo, etc. So that's all I can say about that. But both, you want them on the board as long as possible. You can even play weird, where you can have 1 on turn 1. If you draw into more, you can have 2 more and then just don't do anything. Either have them respond to it, where they have to rest it if you're playing against green, or if they can KO it, in purple or red, and then force them to use Dawn to do that. I've had that happen. But the interesting thing is that if they don't put up a board or have some sort of board presence, you can just tap these down at any point and have multiple on the board, where you can tap down a Momo, you can tap down a Bonnie, and then another Bonnie. That's 3 different swings or 3 different ways that they have to get rid of them. And every single time that you tap these down is another card in your hand. And in this game, it is super important to have some sort of card advantage, which is why these guys are pretty important to the deck and just in general. Either way, that's just a little bit of spiel on the 1 cost. The 2 costs really come down to the 2K counters. So you really don't use Mr. Scratch here. Izu you do sometimes use. It feels pretty bad, but on the bright side, you can grab him back with Law. Because they're 2K counters, you play them both at 4. They're both searchable by Momo and as well as Bonnie, which is why they're so important. And then we also have the other 2 costs here, where we have Killer. I'm always in between, right? I'm always a Dawn short, where you can have the blocker, but at the end, or the on block effect, where you can draw 1 if you have 3. So including himself, you can draw 1 if you attach a Dawn going their side. But I'm always 1 short. Like, I always want to have like a Paradise Waterfall up, or a Dawn up for a Paradise Waterfall, or I want to play a Bonnie and get that extra card for the next turn, that type of thing. But it does come up, especially later in the game, where you just need a blocker, and it'll just save yourself, so that way you can go in with your leader or something different. Cat Viper is really good. It is searchable because as a Wano country, again, pretty much most of the things in this deck is searchable by the 1 cost. But Cat Viper is so good because it targets in the mirror Killer. It can target any of the 1 costs that every deck has. And it can just get rid of problem cards. So, like, again, in the mirror, not Izu, but Okiku, or something similar, where you know that it's going to cause issues, like Nico Robin. Like, Nico Robin being a 4K is a perfect example, where you can just tap it down, you put a Dawn on your leader, and you swing 6K. Now they have to get rid of a 2K and as well as a 1K just to save it. And that doesn't seem like good value if they're really just trying to KO this or a blocker in return. So I think Cat Viper is super clutch. It is a 1K counter in your hand as well, and something to get around the weakest part of your deck, which are blockers technically. So definitely have him at 4, and don't change that. You can change Killer, I will say that. Raizo, so man, I am also in between this guy. I think he has good value, right? I think when you're comparing to a couple of different cards that we're gonna take a look at after this, where I didn't include it, Raizu, he enables you to continue the late game, right? The late game is Useless Kid. You put it down underneath, and then you play something 3 costs or less. Raizo is that, or Kiku, or Izu, etc. Right? Those are pretty much the target, or even Cat Viper. Those are kind of like the best targets for it. But like, Raizu enables you to continue the late game, to have a hand advantage, and as well as to have an additional attacker. Because all you really need to do is just put 1 under the next turn and just swing. And either you can play another thing with the activate main, or you can just put 1 underneath the kid, swing 9K, and then you're Gucci. So I mean, those are the type of things that I think Raizo, it has good advantage, and sometimes I don't. Like, I used to play Killer, the 3 costs. If there was ever like something, the pop of the 3 costs in rest, which we'll look at, if there's ever a sideboard, that's probably what's going to come out. This is probably what's going to come in, that type of thing. But I think overall, in a main board and just in best of 3 without a sideboard, I think he's good. He's great. Okiko at 3. She's really good. Like, the only reason why she's at 3 is because she doesn't have a counter cost. I have ran into so many issues where just like the good cards don't have counter cost to balance out the game, and you just end up just being in that position where you just need that extra to not waste the 2K, because a lot of people just stuff 2Ks into their deck, and they find out that like a lot of the 2Ks are just super situational, and they're not very good at certain points, but they're very good while they're in your hand and do defensively. But Okiko at 3, it is another target for Kid to play it for free, which we'll look into in a second. And it just rests blockers. It can rest the Law in the mirror. It can rest some of the Rush characters as well. It can rest Queen, I believe. So there's a lot of things that this can rest and just take the game for you. You pop down a Dawn. Now they have this wasted 2k for the 6 going to the leader. So that's something to think about in this format. Law is just so good. I want to bump it up 4, but again, it's the counter cost. Some people might play it at 4. Some people might play it at 2. Some people might play the other Law. But I think this Law really enables you to continue to do whatever you want and have that defense. That's the real thing about Kid, where you can just board control. You have a win condition in your leader, and you have good amount of defense in Kid, this Kid, and Law, because you're you're defending your characters by taking it back to your hand, playing down something that affects their characters, or just taking it back to hand and just using that as defense, because you can just play it with either Kid or just play it for extra Dawn later on. So Law is just really good in that way. X-Drake is cool. I really like X-Drake. I wasn't a big fan of X-Drake, but like there's so many times where I'm like, wow, like 4 is really good. Like like 5 is where 5 and higher that we shouldn't really have a removal for unless you're paying a lot, like Mr. Don Flamingo, right? So like if you I think playing 5 is a good cost to get rid of a 4, and you have a 6k body that has a counter. Like there's nothing bad about this, especially since he's searchable. Because you can just put 1 underneath the falling turn and then just swing for 7k. So like it just feels so good. I really like X-Drake. He should be at 2, but I bumped him down for Raizo, so that's all I feel about it. Basil Hawkins, I feel the same exact way for both of these guys. They just have different purposes. Where Basil Hawkins, you can swing for 1 underneath. The 7k is already really good against their leader. They either have to get you an event card, 2k, etc. I've already said it so many times. Or you can just swing at one of their characters, which more often than not, a lot of them outside of these guys, and maybe some of the kings, that type of thing, are pretty easy to swing at. Like they're not that bad. 7k is a lot, and it gets a restand. So like you're swinging at their leader, they block. This gets to restand because now it's in battle with their character. It's not a when attacking effect. It's during your turn. So when it's battling during the blocker battle, it gets to restand. So just don't forget about that. It's really good in the mirror. So like when you're putting down, I don't know, 4 Dawn underneath and you're swinging at the Kid, now they have to waste 2 cards of their hand at each swing. So like Basil Hawkins is just so good. And I feel like when people, and I think people are playing Kid more often now, I think this is going to be such a really good card. Then we have the kids. I've kind of already talked about the 8 drop. 8 I mean, you play these at 3 because you want to see them, and it's kind of like the lifeline of your deck, and everything else sort of supports it, in my opinion. Like 7 and then 8 is kind of what you want to do. So you need to see both. Where you're going to be playing 7. 7k is just a good number to block, because now they have to commit 2, which is 2 less than they can actually use for any of their other plays, or commit to something higher, which in turn you can rest it with something else, something like Straw Sword, and then just swing with the Captain Kid, which more often than not you're going to be using the Dawn X1 to switch it to active when you do that at the end of the turn. So you're just getting a free swing for 8k and a 7k blocker. This guy is really good. Like it wins you the purple matchup as well, because as soon as you get the 7 drop out and then you get the 8 drop right after against purple, especially Kaido, it's really hard to deal with. They have to commit to the 10 drop, which in turn, if they're committing to the 10 drop, then your leader wins the game, if that makes sense. So they have to do some really weird shenanigans, and it just doesn't feel good for them. So this is why this is really good against that. And again, the X1, if you haven't seen this card, of course, you put 1 underneath. He's a 9k for a swing, or you can just use Activate Main, you switch to Rest, and you play a 3 cost for free from your hand. The Dawn one is that they cannot attack anything else other than this card. So just don't worry about I don't know if this is, oh, any other character. So yeah, this is the wrong tax. The errata tax is that they can't swing at any other thing other than this card. Not much to say about it. 7-drop, 8-drop, you win the game. Not really. It takes a little finessing. Paradise Waterfall. Now this is a good card. This is one of the reasons why I included Momo. I didn't play Momo before, but now I included it. It's one of the reasons why I like the trigger effect. There's just a lot of value in Paradise Waterfall because you have Law, you have Kid, and you have the other Kid. That is a 2k counter in your hand for 1. You can double it up and either do some silliness where yeah, like you can block with Law, put a counter down, put the Paradise Waterfall, restand it, or you can block with a Kid, put a counter down, well, yeah, and then play Paradise Waterfall and then restand it, or you can just have this in your life, and then now you can just KO something for a less. Which is just crazy to me. It's just, I mean, it's just sitting there. You just KO something. Can't talk about it enough. It is good. The other cards we'll talk about as well, but that's how I feel about Paradise Waterfall. I think it's the best one. And then there's Punk Gibson. So 2 feels hefty. I know that sounds weird, but like the way that you play this deck, you end up tapping a lot until you stabilize a good board. And until that point, Punk Gibson kind of feels lame. But the trigger effect is really good. So if you reveal it in your life, you get to rest one of their characters, which is awesome. And the counter effect is that you get plus 4k, and then you get to rest down something for a less, which a good player will always see coming, right? If they know you have 2 or 3, Dawn up, a Pumpkinson is going to come up, and then they're going to rest something. So they're probably going to play a card, or they're going to swing with a card and then play something after they swing with it, so that way they can get around Pumpkinson. But if they don't, then you can prevent 2 different attacks, and that's really, really good. Straw Sword, again, is just a 2 for the activate main, where you just rest something, and that takes care of blockers that can enable you to swing with the big boy Kid in case they played something on their turn and they're just hoping for it not to die. There's a lot of things there. And the trigger is interesting because you get to use a Supernovas card or 2 costs or less from your hand, which the best one is probably going to be the killer here for additional blocker, or Bonnie. Yeah, I think that those are going to be the best ones that you can do. I want to shortly touch on this before we get out of here. I know some people have different builds, and I don't think anybody's going to have the perfect build until we get into February and they win with that deck. Locals is cool, but it doesn't really give you everything as far as the field, and I'm sure we're going to have the capped point in February for 512 players, and we'll really find out, you know, what's good and what's not. But if anything, this, what did I want to talk? Other cards you could play. I don't think in the set there's too many other cards that are useful in this. It is nice to have another 2k counter if you're really obsessed with that. Beppo can do that for you. Heart Pyres aren't really, there are not very many Heart Pyres you can really use. So don't really recommend that. Nico is just another Cat Viper, to be honest. I used to play Kawamatsu just because of the trigger effect. That was really not that good of an idea, so don't do that. And in the starter deck, there's 2 or 3 cards you can consider. So Urage, where you have 1 additional Dawn and you have 3 more characters, which is really easy. The 8 cost plays 1, and then you have the 7-drop if you're playing it, all right, or if your luck is there. Or you can play the 8-drop and then the 3, and then you can play this as well if you have enough Dawn, and then swing with it. Now for 1 Dawn, you're looking at a 6k swing for 2. So he's good. I used to play him. I just didn't want to commit the 2. It just felt a little weird because it can easily be removed by a lot of different decks. And as soon as it swings, it's dead unless you have protection for it. So I don't know. I just didn't really feel too good about it. I like Killer. Killer is great because of the trigger. You get to play it. It just didn't come up as much as I wanted to in testing. But it is something, again, if we have sideboards, it's really good to have. It's just awkward to have 3 for 3k. It is nice that it is a 1 cost counter, though. I will say that. Or 1,000 counter. And the last thing is Repel, and Scalpel. So Scalpel is cool because you get to untap one of your Dawn to active, which is great because it's basically just free. But I just don't feel like it is that impactful. Repel is a little bit better because it is just technically for one, but it always felt awkward just to leave 2 just for this, and I'd rather pay for Pumpkinson instead. So that's how I feel about that. All right, that is enough talking. Hopefully that gave you enough information from all the things that I've learned so far from playing this deck, and as well as others. I hope to really ramp it up in this upcoming month as far as just One Piece in general, and just like having gameplay. I really want to do well in these upcoming February tournaments. I will be at the core one to do the production, but I will probably be at the Miami one to play. So I will see you there, and let me know in the comments below if there's anything else that you want to know or any decks in the future. I'll see you in the next one.